It was like a real bad movie. None of it seemed real whatsoever.
When Dimebag Darrell was gunned down on stage, almost everybody figured the bitter Pantera feud was finally dead and buried. You'd think there'd only be room for one thing next: silence, mourning, and maybe some long overdue closure. But that didn't happen. Just the opposite. Dimebag's death didn't heal the rift, it set it in stone. The one man everyone expected to bury the hatchet refused to let it go. Never. And that turned the Pantera story into an open wound, a never-ending war that outlived Dimebag himself. So why did such a gut-wrenching loss only add fuel to the fire? After that night, everything seemed cut and dried. The shooter was identified. The tragedy played out in plain sight. But for this story, nothing was that simple. Because the real fallout didn't start with the gunfire, it started after. It wasn't about who pulled the trigger, but who was still held accountable for setting the stage. For Vinnie Paul, this was way past the law. It was about the words slung beforehand. A bitter feud that went way out of bounds. It was about crossing a line you can never, ever uncross. Why did he flat out refuse to accept any apologies? What exactly was said before Dimebag went down that couldn't be unsaid after the funeral? And why, for Vinnie, didn't that guilt die on the stage with his brother? Before the split, Pantera looked untouchable, a rock-solid core. Born in Arlington, Texas, by the early 90s they were moving as one absolute unit. Their breakthrough was locked down between 1990 and 1994. Cowboys from Hell, vulgar display of power, far beyond driven. By the mid-90s, they were packing arenas across the US and Europe, seen by everyone as an unbreakable brotherhood. You saw it on stage, and you felt it off stage. A massive, tight sound, playing in dead sync, not a single crack in the armor. Their interviews stuck to the same old-school code. What happens in the family, stays in the family. No dirty laundry. For the fans, this cemented their image as a bulletproof machine, every gear grinding perfectly toward the same goal. That's exactly why the breakup hit like a freight train. It wasn't just a band falling apart. It shattered an illusion. That rock-solid stability, built for years on massive records, relentless tours, and their image as an unstoppable, unified force, just crumbled to dust. The tension inside Pantera started boiling over long before the tragedy. Front and center was Phil Anselmo and his offstage antics. The drug problems, the meltdowns, and the increasingly vicious trash talk were eating away at the band's working bond. This wasn't just a rough patch anymore. It became the new normal, a constant dark cloud hanging over every decision and poisoning the vibe. Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul stood shoulder to shoulder, seeing the whole mess differently. For the brothers, the band was still a shared machine they desperately needed to keep on the rails. But the trust was tanking fast. Interviews turned toxic. Lines were drawn in the sand. Private arguments bled into public mudslinging. At a certain point, it wasn't just behind-the-scenes friction anymore. The band literally fractured. The work stopped dead. Communication hit rock bottom. The ugly feud was out in the open. And right then, it became dead clear. This runaway train was heading for a cliff, and there was absolutely no turning back. By the early 2000s, the split was a done deal. The collaboration flatlined. No records, no tours. Communication was practically dead. They called their own shots. Contact hung by a thread, then faded to black. Phil Anselmo was busy pushing his own side projects, making it damn clear he had no intention of going back to the old formula. His stance was blunt: move forward and don't look back. On their end, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell carved out their own path, officially giving up the ghost on rebuilding the old machine. The grievances weren't kept behind closed doors anymore. They spilled out and got cemented in public press wars. There was no master plan left. Every man for himself, playing by their own rules. The nail was in the coffin long before the hell that followed. If this is more than just another band breakup to you, if it's a story about a feud that outlived death itself, sound off in the comments. We want to know what hits you right in the gut. Was it the words that shattered it all? The refusal to forgive? Or the cold, hard fact that this war never ended? Tell us what you see as the absolute core of this story. Meanwhile, we're pushing forward. Because now we need to break down exactly how this rift got locked in and why it stayed frozen in time for years. December 8th, 2004. Dimebag Darrell hit the stage with Damage Plan. Just another night on the road. Minutes later, a gunman breached the venue and opened fire. It went down fast. At first, the crowd couldn't even process what was happening. Security scrambled, but only after the first shots rang out. Dimebag was killed on the spot. Several others lost their lives right alongside him. For the metal scene and the fans, this was a shock that completely shattered the mold. A guy who had spent decades absolutely commanding the stage with raw power found himself in a spot where nobody could rewrite the ending. This instantly went way beyond your standard industry tragedy. It was supposed to be the moment that wiped the slate clean, closed the book on the past, but that's exactly when all those years of bad blood refused to vanish. Instead, the tension dug in, locked into place, and mutated into something else entirely. After Dimebag died, it wasn't new events that cemented the feud. It was old words, dragged back into the cold light of day. Just days before the murder, Phil went on record with Metal Hammer, stating Dimebag deserves to be beaten severely. He tried to backtrack later. Tried to explain the context, soften the blow, and brush it off as standard inter-band friction, but Vinnie Paul wasn't buying it. He heard what was said about his blood, and he flat-out rejected any late-game damage control. Years down the line, Vinnie doubled down. He made it clear he didn't trust a damn word out of Phil's mouth, telling people to go read that exact interview if they wanted to see Phil's true colors. For Vinnie, this was way beyond one careless slip of the tongue. He saw a brutal chain of events, the bitter split, the silent treatment, the public cheap shots at his brother, followed by a desperate attempt to spin the narrative after Dimebag was gone. That's exactly how those words became a death sentence for this relationship. Not because there was new evidence to argue over, but because in Vinnie's mind, the verdict was already carved in stone. And that was more than enough to slam the door shut forever. After Dimebag's death, Vinnie Paul drew a hard line in the sand and never gave an inch. He kept the door to reconciliation slammed shut. He gave no mixed signals in interviews and offered zero false hope that time would eventually soften his stance. To the outside world, it might have looked ruthless. But to Vinnie, it was the ultimate act of loyalty to his brother, and to the hard truth of exactly how they reached the point of no return. His logic was crystal clear. The Pantera breakdown started way back. Then came the public gut punches, the massive distance, the vicious words about Dimebag, and the total demolition of trust. Once his brother was murdered, Vinnie wasn't about to rewrite history. Belated explanations didn't change a damn thing. Apologies that were too little, too late meant even less. He refused to separate Dimebag's death from the toxic mess that led up to it. To him, it was all one unbroken chain. That's exactly why his refusal to forgive wasn't some temporary flash of grief. It was a permanent state of being. He made a choice to walk away from that relationship forever, and he stuck to his guns right to the bitter end. After the tragedy, the olive branches were extended. Phil Anselmo went public with his regrets. He owned up to his past words being a massive mistake. He tried to provide context, claiming they were taken the wrong way and didn't carry the venom people saw in them. As the years rolled on, the apologies got much more direct. There were open pleas to finally sit down, hash it out, and put the ugly feud to bed. But for Vinnie Paul, it didn't change a damn thing. He flat out ignored the public appeals. He didn't bite on the gestures and never gave a single sign he was ready to rehash the past. Every word coming from Phil was met with dead silence. Vinnie's stance didn't budge an inch. By that point, Vinnie already had the whole picture permanently locked in his head. No amount of fresh talk was going to repaint it, so all the regrets, the explanations, the belated apologies, none of it was enough to unlock that door and find a way back. As the years dragged on, the feud just froze solid. In September 2016, before Hellier played the Maximus Festival in Sao Paulo, Vinnie Paul doubled down on the exact same line. He hadn't spoken a word to Phil Anselmo since 2000. A weak attempt to patch things up during the Damage Plan days went absolutely nowhere, and Dimebag's death was, in Vinnie's own words, the nail in the coffin. Right then and there, He killed any chatter about a Pantera reunion. By July 2017, his refusal was just a cold, hard fact of life. Vinnie declared he would never speak to Phil again. With that massive wall up, even big money reunion offers were completely pointless. June 22, 2018. Vinnie Paul passed away in Las Vegas at the age of 54. Right up to his very last breath, his stance never shifted. The feud remained locked in the deep freeze. Time marched on. The verdict stayed exactly the same. When Vinnie passed in 2018, the book was permanently closed. No inside fix, ever. Today, Pantera's legacy is a split screen, their massive heavy metal footprint, and a bitter war that never died. When the name hit the stage again in 2022, the old ghosts came right back with it. The cold hard takeaway? Death doesn't erase the venom we spit. It sure as hell doesn't rebuild burned bridges. It just pours concrete over the divide. Could they have settled this earlier? Or once you cross that line, is there really no going back? Let me know where you stand down in the comments.